Have you ever passed the same person every day and never truly seen them? The kind of person who blends so completely into the background that their presence feels permanent, almost guaranteed. Most people never imagine that one quiet act of kindness, repeated without attention or praise, could slowly reshape two lives in ways no one expects. This is a story about routine, about invisibility, and about how something as simple as a daily meal can carry consequences far beyond what anyone could foresee. Every morning began the same way. The street woke slowly, stretching itself into the day as the early light filtered between buildings and the hum of distant traffic replaced the quiet of night. Metal shutters lifted, doors unlocked. The city moved forward on habit alone, powered by schedules and obligations that left little room for reflection. On the corner of that street stood a small restaurant, modest and unremarkable at first glance. Its sign bore the wear of years, and its windows reflected a world that rarely paused long enough to notice it. Inside, however, there was warmth, the kind that lingered even before the stoves were turned on, the kind that came from consistency rather than luxury. The owner arrived before sunrise each day. He unlocked the door, turned on the lights, and stood still for a moment, listening. Silence filled the space briefly before it gave way to movement. This moment mattered to him more than he admitted. It reminded him that some things were still within his control. He moved through the restaurant with precision born from repetition. Counters were wiped, ingredients checked, chairs aligned. Everything followed the same order every single morning. The routine was not boring to him. It was grounding. Across the street, barely noticeable unless one looked carefully, stood a bench. It was old, bolted into cracked pavement beneath a tree that no longer offered shade. Most people passed it without a glance, their eyes trained forward, their minds elsewhere. But every morning, a man known only as Dingy sat there quietly. He arrived early and left late. He did not ask for money. He did not raise his voice or draw attention to himself. He simply sat, hands folded loosely, watching the world move past him as though he were observing a life he once belonged to. Dingy's clothes were worn but clean. His posture was upright. There was a quiet dignity about him that contradicted the assumptions people often made. He looked like someone who had once lived very differently. The restaurant owner noticed him on the first day he opened the business. At the time, it was nothing more than awareness, a recognition that the same figure occupied the same space day after day. Over time, that awareness grew heavier. The owner began to notice how people avoided the bench without meaning to, how their eyes slid past the man as though he were part of the scenery. Weeks passed, then months. The man remained. One morning, as the owner prepared food for the day ahead, he realized he had more than he needed. The extra sat warm and untouched, and the thought of throwing it away felt wrong. Without deliberation, he placed it into a container, sealed it, and stepped outside. He crossed the street quietly. Dingy looked up as the container was placed beside him. No words were exchanged. No explanation was offered. The owner returned to the restaurant as though nothing unusual had happened. The next day, Dingy was there again. So was the owner. Another container appeared on the bench. Then another the day after that. The exchange became part of the morning routine, as natural as unlocking the door or turning on the lights. The owner never spoke about it. He never announced it or sought recognition. It was simply something that felt necessary. Dingy never asked for more. He accepted the food with the same quiet composure every day. He never approached the restaurant. He never changed his place on the bench. He never made himself visible to those who didn't wish to see him. Time passed. Seasons shifted. Rain soaked the pavement. Wind cut through the street. Summer gave way to colder mornings, and frost clung to the bench. The owner adjusted without thinking. Containers were sealed tighter. Portions were kept warmer. Sometimes a hot drink appeared alongside the meal. Still, nothing was said. The city continued its indifference. Customers filled the restaurant, unaware of the quiet ritual unfolding just beyond the walls. They talked about their lives, their problems, their plans. The bench across the street remained invisible. Over time, subtle changes became noticeable. Dingy sat a little straighter. His movements steadied. The weariness that once clung to him softened. He still spoke to no one, but there was a calm attentiveness in his eyes, as though he were fully present in each passing moment. The owner noticed these changes without acknowledging them openly. Years of running a business had taught him that not everything required explanation. Winter deepened. The mornings grew harsher, and the street felt less forgiving. The owner found himself watching the bench more closely than before. He told himself it was coincidence, yet he felt a quiet reassurance each time he saw the familiar figure seated there. The thought came unexpectedly one morning. If the bench were ever empty, something would be wrong. The idea lingered longer than it should have. Then one day, the bench was empty. The owner noticed it immediately. At first, he told himself it meant nothing. People came and went. Lives shifted. He went about his routine, preparing the food as always. Still, the absence weighed on him. The next morning, the bench remained empty. And the morning after that, days passed. The owner began to feel a quiet unease he could not shake. No one else seemed to notice. The street moved forward as it always had. But something fundamental had changed. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was delivered by hand, plain, unassuming, and addressed to the owner. Inside, it explained what words never had. The man on the bench had not been homeless by circumstance alone. He had once lived a life of comfort, success, and wealth. Loss had driven him away from everything familiar, and pride had kept him silent. Years earlier, the entire plaza had belonged to Dingy, Donaldo Gregory Henry. It had been his life's work, built slowly from nothing, shaped by long nights and personal sacrifice. He had poured himself into its walls, its name, and the restaurant especially. But when illness and family losses collided with financial pressure, he had been forced into agreements he barely understood at the time. The building had been taken from him, not violently, not dramatically, but quietly, through paperwork, signatures, and trust placed in the wrong hands. By the time he realized what had happened, the restaurant no longer belonged to him and the building had been leased out. His role reduced to nothing. What remained was the bench across the street. He stayed close, not out of bitterness, but out of attachment. Watching a place he once built continue without him was easier than letting it disappear entirely. Sitting there each day was the only way he knew how to remain connected to a life that had slipped through his hands. The meals had never been charity to him. They had been recognition, a reminder that what he had built still mattered, that kindness could exist without contracts or conditions, that he was still seen, even if only by one person. The letter explained that the plaza itself had always remained in his name. The businesses had been taken, but the property had not. Sadly, Dingy's chapter on Earth was ended while he slept the night before the restaurant owner noticed him missing. But he had already made arrangements. The leases had been terminated. Ownership of the plaza had been transferred to the restaurant owner, not to reclaim the past, but to secure the future. He stood still as he read the letter, the noise of the restaurant fading into the background. He thought of the bench, of the routine, of the meals given without expectation, how close he had come to never noticing at all. He remained speechless as the weight of the truth settled in. The place he had worked in every day, the walls he had wiped down, the door he unlocked each morning, had belonged all along to the man he had fed without knowing why. The meals had not saved Dingy's life in the way people often imagine. They had restored something else: dignity, stability, trust. The bench was not a coincidence. It had been a vantage point. The restaurant continued to open every morning, but now every movement carried meaning. Every meal prepared echoed a history unseen. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness are not meant to be witnessed. They are meant to endure. In this case, they rewrite ownership, legacy, and time itself. The new owner was very grateful. His life was changed forever. The plaza and the restaurant was renamed in Dingy's honor, not as a reward, not as payment, but as recognition.
If you enjoyed this series, show your love by clicking the like button, leave a comment and share to your friends and families. Thanks for watching, and if you want to watch more amazing tales like these, subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell so you will be notified when I post another video. Take care until next time.